Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at an extremely fun build, and that's going to be an anvil in the main hand and then an offhand hammer. So basically this is for all of those blacksmithing enthusiasts that want to take their craft on the road with them. Really, you can do your blacksmithing anywhere because you've got a hammer in one hand and an anvil in the other. You don't have to like show up and get your work done with other people's equipment. Jokes aside, this is going to be a level 139 build. This is going to be mostly strength, but will require 20 faith, 11 intelligence, and we're also going to have 12 dex just for the fire misericord. And because this is a pretty chunky boy, this is going to require 42 endurance, and we'll also hit 89 poise, which is not a ton of poise, but we'll have a lot of hyper armor, so it's pretty nice there. I'm also going to be recommending that you two-hand your weapon a lot, so even if you are using the hammer or the anvil hammer, you're going to want to, two-hand it most of the time just to get that extra strength. And then we also have Shard of Alexander. Because this is a faith build, you can go ahead and buff yourself with Flame Grant Me Strength, and that will also help out with the AR on the anvil hammer because it is a split between fire and physical. And then to further kind of go with that theme, we also have Flaming Strike on our hammer. So that's going to be pretty cool. And then probably the coolest part about this build is going to be the Ash of War, the smithing art spears, which is this overhead slam and then comes out of the ground and these spears appear, and if anyone walks into those spears, they're going to take damage. So it's a really long lingering hitbox, probably the longest I've seen in just kind of any sort of Ash of War, longer than Flaming Strike, that is to say. But yeah, these weapons have great synergy together. You have this slow option, you also have this fast option, everything has hyper armor, and then if you need something a little bit faster, you also have the misericord with the internal billows. So you can go ahead for Stormblade and have a nice little ranged attack, which will be useful if you have an opponent that is very low on health and kind of far away, and it's just difficult to catch up with them when you're carrying a giant anvil as well as another hammer. So yeah, I thought this build was a ton of fun to run. I thought the anvil could really catch people off guard. A lot of people don't know what this Ash of War is, and it has some nice hyper armor with it as well. So yeah, I definitely recommend you give this a try. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I would appreciate it. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the showcase. Alright, so our first invasion is going to be in the Tower Settlement area, and we're going to grab our quick Flame Grant Me Strength buff just so we can get a little bit of more AR when we go for our different hammer and anvil attacks here. So we're going to be definitely switching pretty fluidly between the hammer and the anvil, and we've got a player with a heavy thrusting sword, and we do manage to land a massive heavy attack for about half their HP. They're doing a pretty good job of just pressing their light attack button, so we need to respect that. We're getting poise broken here. The two-handed HTS is definitely going to be doing a decent amount of poise, and yeah, we just need to be a little bit careful. We managed to get a Flaming Strike in and the follow-up, and that allows one of the PvE to just come and collect that Phantom for us. So that turns it into a 2v1, which is definitely a wonderful sight to see because this setup is kind of difficult in multi-opponent situations, especially when you have some of the slower stuff. So we do see our opponent take a little bit of chip damage from the Ash of War. Obviously, it's much better when you get the whole overhead swing and kind of get all the different parts of the Ash of War. But yeah, just like having that little bit of extra keep out is not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. So one of the Phantoms comes in and starts going for the PvE, and we're actually able to combo a jumping heavy into one of the big faith attacks from the PvE overhead. So yeah, baiting them out into this area is definitely the play. And now we're contending with a player that's running some backhand blades, which is pretty tough, but we do have just a straight up hammer, and the quick hits are going to be quite helpful, and we can kind of just keep swinging because our hyper armor is going to keep us doing damage and breaking their poise, whereas their weapon is not going to break our poise. So that can be definitely one of the nice things about this type of setup. Next up, we're going to have a 2v1, and this player is certainly a Moog Spear enjoyer. Really hoping to get the blood loss buildup going on myself, but we're going to try to avoid that, and also we can get this player slept. So the fact that they have the little bubble protecting them is a big issue because all of our attacks are super slow, so if we spend the entire time it takes to go for like a jumping attack on this player, and it only does like 2 damage, we're going to take a lot of damage in the process, so it's going to be a bad trade, essentially. So we need to use some fan daggers, get rid of that bubble, and then we can start aggressing with our hammer. We get them pretty close to dead, but unfortunately they're able to get some heals off, and they're getting covered a little bit by the host. So we're going to go ahead and go for our Ash of War just as a little bit of a turn and burn, and there you can see the power of the spears. As they ran away, they were still in the hitbox of those spears, and so even though they took the full damage from the first 2 hits, the little bit of extra spear damage brought that damage up into like a little bit over 1,000. So yeah, not anything to sneeze at, definitely a fun kind of Ash of War to go for, and your ability to get turn and burns with it is actually like surprisingly not so bad. Here we had an unfortunate roll input that we didn't want at all, so we ended up rolling into their heavy attack, but that's all right. We've reset back to neutral, and we now have close to full health, and here we can just trade with our Ash of War and again do close to 1,000 damage, and then we just give them a little swipe with the Misericord Cord and come out with the victory. So next up we have another situation in the Tower Settlement area, and here are 2 fine fellows that are just kind of hanging out in this area, maybe trying to surprise me, I'm not sure. One of them is getting their moon veil all polished off and ready to go. They do manage to hit me with that, and then we do have the big dragon katana coming in for a decent amount of damage, but we're going to need to go for our Ash of War, use that hyper armor to get around 1,000 damage after the player gets hit by the spears, and then we get just a real nice quick hit in that finishes them off. So probably should be running a little bit more vigor, but such is the case in the DLC these days. So we have a host here that's running a rune arc, casting some spells, doing a number of different things. They've got some ranged attacks, so it can be nice to pull out the pocket billows. And here we are hoping to roll in and get a backstab, and it takes a little bit of damage to get us there, but we do manage to roll in and get that backstab with the hammer and come out with the victory and just kind of give them a wave. Next up, we're going to be in the storehouse, and this was kind of a funny situation where I think this phantom was meant to like bait me in. So they do bait me in for sure, but we go for just a running attack with the giant hammer. Unfortunately, that's a tough one to block. Colossal weapons are notorious for doing quite a bit of poise damage, so we're going to be able to get the guard break there, and then we're going to go for the follow-up with the Misericord, and that turns us into a one-on-one real quick. So it can be difficult to manage a one-on-one with the Anvil, so switching over to just the hammer gives us some nice quick hits, but we're going to be, swapping off back and forth, seeing if we can get our Ash of War in the mix, seeing if maybe they'll come in, and yes, they do, taking close to 200 damage just by the little spears, so the lingering hitbox is super nice. I'm definitely an enjoyer of that sort of situation, and then we just get a nice roll catch with the hammer. So yeah, having that difference in speed and difference in damage you can do is really nice. Here we go for a random Ash of War. We get not that much damage, but it does actually do a decent job of playing a little bit of keep out. Now this phantom is not running very much HP, but what can you do? We land a jumping attack for almost all of their health bar, which is absurd, and just start going in with the hammer and a little bit of the anvil as well. And here they get kind of caught in the corner. We go for our Ash of War, hoping to catch them. Fortunately, it's a little bit too slow for this player, but we do get a nice anti-air with the anvil. We go for the Flaming Strike Wake Up, which does do some damage to the host, but not much on the phantom, but 2 swings are going to be enough with the hammer. And now we can start focusing on the host here. We go for a number of trades with them, and it's going to be a bad trade for them just based on the size of my weapon. It's a pretty big bonk to be taking, and then we utilize some of the hyper armor with the smaller bonk and come out with the victory. Next up, we're going to take a break from the Shadow of the Erd Tree and head over to the Boiled Prong Shack. And while we do have one fat rolling host, which is always a pleasure to see, we're going to have a number of different challenges throughout the course of this invasion here. So we do get a pretty big chunk of damage there, about 900 on our Ash of War. We're able to break the poise of our opponent while they're in their Ash of War, but this does have quite a long string, a ton of range, and we get them quite low. Hoping to maybe finish them off with Stormblade, but we decide to heal just because the host is close. And then we get a rather unenjoyable red who joins the party and aggroes nobody but me. So I don't know if they see the color red and just assume that's my target, but typically that's not how we like invasions to work. Here we try to go for a jumping heavy. Fortunately, the tracking is not what we're hoping for, but we haven't taken too much damage in this scenario yet. We dodge a nice crouching attack from the power stance katana setup, and then go for a couple more swings with the anvil. It's definitely tough to get like good reads on this. You kind of need to bait your opponents into things and then shut them down a little bit. So if we can get them to be swinging a lot and then go for our Ash of War, that'll be pretty ideal. Here they do jump into the spears, which is pretty nice. I'm always happy to see that. And they go for their full Ash of War chain, so we nicely follow that up with a nice backstab. So fortunately that doesn't do the entire HP bar, so I think because we're in water here, you know, we're kind of at a disadvantage with the anvil just because it's, you know, it's doing a mix of fire and physical damage, and that gets nerfed just by being in water. So definitely an unfortunate place to invade, but we do manage to get the chase down with the Misericord. Next we start getting 2v1 by the host and the Phantom, or the co-invader. So they go for a dragon attack. We decide to try to get them out of the air. Surprisingly, we're able to do that with a crouching attack, so that hitbox has more verticality than you might think, I would suppose, but we start going in with the hammer, and we throw out a flaming strike. It ends up being a pretty bad trade in that scenario, so we're gonna back off, just kind of heal a little bit and see what the co has up its sleeve next for us. So we do see the seal come out, and then Taker's Flame for the win, actually helping us out and collecting that co-invader. And now we can just swap over to the anvil. We're not too worried since this player is fat rolling. It's going to be making them a little bit easier to catch. We do get a nice jumping light attack as they roll away. We go for our Ash of War. That was a little bit of hopefulness there. I think maybe foolishness as well. But they get back to full health. We start chasing them down with a mixture of the hammer as well as the anvil. The hammer is definitely going to be a little bit better for this. We go for a nice crouching attack with the anvil, switch back over to the hammer, and I'm just trying to get the setup correct. We're seeing if we can get an Estus punish with the bellows, but no such luck. And here we go in for a roll-in backstab and do a decent amount of damage, but again, since they are in water, it's not doing as much as it could be. And we do get Flaming Strike for the finish as a blue casts waves of gold behind us. So yeah, the prawn shack is always an interesting time, to say the least. Next up, we're going to have a group of 3, but everybody is hiding very bravely, and we're going to see that looks a little odd, so we're going to swing at it. And yeah, the group is not super fun. We have the Madness Snipe that goes on forever. We have Marika's Hammer, and then we have a third player who I'm not totally sure what they're doing. I think they have Perfume. So yeah, just an unideal mixture of tasks to take on here. Marika's Hammer comes in hot and heavy. I'm not the best with that timing anymore. I had it on lock for a little while, and then I took a little Elden Ring break, and now my timing is about 50-50. And then we see the delightful waves of gold, but we're gonna use this elevator to our advantage, which also subsequently nerfs Perfume quite a bit. It just goes straight into the floor, which is awesome to see. My Flaming Strike also does go straight into the floor, but I think it's nicer to see that on the Perfume. And also we don't get the spears on our anvil. So we're learning a lot about this elevator, and we're just kind of enjoying our one-on-one with this player with the Scavenger Curve swords. And yeah, we do end up coming out successful there. We dodge the waves of gold and then get hit with Dragon Breath from behind. So just, you know, typical invasion stuff. Here is what I'm talking about, where the roll was not correct. I think I heard the Dragon Breath in the background and also got concerned. We just kind of hop around this corner so we can get our health back a little bit. And then we know that this player in the dragon costume is definitely into just kind of pressing their buttons. So if we can go for our Ash of War like Stormblade several times, we think, you know, maybe we'll just hit them over and over again. But yeah, we don't feel like kind of dealing with light rolling, madness sniping, power stance whipping, and dragon breathing player in 2v1. So we decided to just kind of end it with the host. Moving on, our first duel is going to be against a player who goes for the emote punish, which is always an interesting strategy. They're going to be throwing out some of the fireballs, and we go for a running heavy with the Anvil, seeing if we can get anything to connect, swap over to the hammer, and start pressuring a little bit. They go for a crouching attack that we're able to roll, and then we start coming in hot heavy with the Anvil. We're happy to take trades, so we're doing quite a bit more damage, and then the offhand hammer is going to do a decent amount of damage as well. They go in for several attacks, and we're pretty close to landing a backstab, but they are able to roll out, and then they start casting some more fireballs in our direction, so we're going to need to roll those. And those could definitely set up a nice frame trap, but what's better than a frame trap is an Ash of War that sends spears into your opponent. So we come out with the victory there and move on to our next player. So this player is going to be running a Shamshir, and they're going to be doing a decent job of just kind of like spacing, but we're taking in some nice trades here. They start mashing a little bit, so we're also going to mash a little bit because our setup is pretty mash forward, I would say. The hyper armor that you get on both the Anvil and the hammer is going to be quite substantial. We switch over to the two-handed moveset for the hammer for a little bit, and then swap over to the Anvil just to go for our Ash of War. And here we can see them getting hit by the spears that come out of the ground. The lingering hitbox there is quite nice. And then we swap back over to the hammer just because that's going to be much better for the finish, and we're able to take one more trade for the victory. Our next opponent here is going to be running a Guardian Sword Spear, so one of my favorite weapons for sure, but it's going to be a little bit of a tough matchup. We're able to land a nice hammer attack real quick, and we're getting clipped out of the air by the Guardian Sword Spear running attack. They go for a random parry. We don't get baited into it, which is great, and we throw out a Flaming Strike. We don't connect all of it, but we do connect the spears for the lingering hitbox on our Ash of War for the finish. So yeah, people definitely like to punish that, and it works out pretty well. Our next opponent is going to be running the Death Knight axes. So these have a pretty nasty Ash of War that's pretty hard to dodge. We're going to go ahead and throw out a random hammer hit, and then here we're going to try to trade into their Ash of War with our own. And here we do a pretty good job of that, I would say, and we have a good lead in health. So we get hit by their Ash of War this time, but we throw out Flaming Strike and then start aggressing with the Anvil. We throw out another hammer swing just in case and go for running heavy, hoping to clip them as they roll away. They've swapped over to a more incantation-focused setup, so going for some of the Thorns, which is a bold move since it does take away some of their own HP. Then they go for the Blight Lightning, which can do tons of damage if it hits you, but it's kind of random, and we're able to finish the chase down with the crouching attack on the hammer. Our next opponent is going to be running power stance katanas, or one is going to be a regular katana, one is going to be a great katana, and we managed to take a decent amount of damage in the beginning here without getting much in return, but we get 2 quick hits and follow up with Flaming Strike, and then look out for their Ash of War and come on potentially for some jumping attacks or just some light attacks with the offhand hammer. Here we do get hit for a big chunk with their Ash of War, and we're pretty low on health at this point, so we're going to need to be careful. They've also got some projectiles that are fairly difficult to dodge. They come out very quickly, and you really have to be focused on where they're at. They're also like kind of hard to see, which makes things difficult. So we're going to be a little bit more aggressive with the hammer at this point, and we throw out a Flaming Strike and get them almost all the way there. We don't have the best connection, so we finish it off with the Pocket Billows, and we come out with a victory against somebody that was a little bit latent there. Our next opponent is going to be running a great katana, so a lot of great katanas today, but we're going to let them finish their bow and then start aggressing. They go for a jumping heavy. We go for our own heavy attack with the Anvil, and then throw out a light attack with the offhand hammer. Here we're able to punish their Ash of War with a nice jumping attack with the hammer, the Anvil hammer that is, and then they roll into Flaming Strike, which is pretty tough, and we need to just look out for a number of their swings. We were patient enough and let them finish, and then follow it up with just a single strike from the hammer. Our next opponent is going to be running a Shamshir, and they're very into rolling and very into spinning slash. So yeah, it's an interesting choice. We're going to go ahead and try to punish it with our Ash of War. We're really trying to knock them out of this attack that they seem so partial to. We go ahead and manage to knock them out of some of it, but I think due to some latency we're having some issues, and then we hit Flaming Strike for the finish just because we seemed like we understood their plan and wanted to shut it down a little bit. That's going to be it for the showcase. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I would appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day.